Hidden Gems, episode 26. All for one and one for all. 3-player games. Welcome to Hidden Gems, a board game podcast where we review unusual, forgotten, and underappreciated board games. We're your hosts. My name is Chris.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Cameron. Thanks for listening to our show.
He's back.
I'm back.
We're back. I guess you were here while I was gone.
I get to say that every time because there's always like 3 episodes in between me being here.
It was supposed to be every other episode you were gone, but now it's like every 3 or 4.
I got a baby. I get to go on vacation.
Feels like a long time for me because I feel like I was out.
True, yeah.
You did an episode while I was gone. Now I'm back. So
got the OG team back together.
We have. I was trying to think just now, how long has it been since we've done one, just the 3 of us all together? It's been a while.
I couldn't tell you. We've had a lot of great guests
Before
on the
Christmas.
show.
We have.
And I'm grateful to Ben and Bill for filling in.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome we have such a big game group we can draw from and have people that we can have on. But I think we were talking about this the other night when we were playing just the 3 of us. It was kind of nice just to have the 3 of us playing games again.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like a really great session, really fun, conversational. Really enjoyed it.
yeah, 3-player games was a good choice for this one.
Yeah.
You know what I was thinking about? We were talking about this this past week, just how we're getting toward the end of our first year of doing this podcast.
Nuts.
And if you guys were totaling up how many games we've reviewed, it's like in the 70s reviewed. Yeah. I'm surprised that we've even played 70 of your games.
my dusty games.
Yeah, exactly.
Not Terraforming Mars or something like that.
Yeah, do you know how many it is?
It's like 72, 73, something like that.
You know, there was a couple that we only did 2 games per episode. So that's why I was like, it's 70 to 72 probably.
Yeah. The crazy thing is we started this off, and we actually haven't talked about it in a while. Maybe in an upcoming episode soon we'll talk about our mining efforts again. But if you've listened all the way back to the beginning of our episode streak here, we talked a lot about mining the Board Game Geek database. And so I still have the spreadsheet. I don't spend quite as much time on it recently, but I was going back through that list and realizing that even that total list that we have, we've already reviewed like 10% of that list.
That's crazy.
Which is just nuts.
It is crazy.
So we still have 9 years worth of content left. So,
At least.
I'm not worried.
I'm still adding new stuff to it every day, either from our guild members giving recommendations or just finding stuff myself too.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how many games there are.
Yeah.
There are so many. You just couldn't play them all in your lifetime.
That's
I don't
right.
think, if you wanted to.
Cool. Well, Cameron, you've been traveling a lot. I gave an update on my travels on the last episode, so you want to tell us a little bit about where you've been and what you've been up to?
Yeah, for sure. So my family and some friends and I had the privilege after Christmas of actually going to Ireland. We spent a little bit of time in Dublin and then a couple days in the north of Ireland in Belfast, and then about 4 days on the west coast in County Clare in this cute little cottage out there. And the reason for our trip was that I play the Irish bagpipes called the Uilleann bagpipes or the elbow bagpipes. So not kilts and loud noises on a hilltop, but more like the pub style indoor instrument. I fell in love with it the first time I went to Ireland back in 2016 and had all sorts of people laughing at me, telling me that I could never learn how to play it because apparently it takes 20 years to learn how to play. And I was like, I am going to figure this out. And I got a hold of a cheap set, and then I found someone locally that helped me learn how to play. So I ordered a set 3 years ago from this guy, Aaron O'Hagan, right outside of Belfast. And this was the trip that I finally got to go on 3 years later to collect my pipes and give it a try for the first time. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it sounded like a ceremony. It was like a special moment.
It was a special moment. Casey and Owen were with me. And
it takes them like a long time to make these things, right?
Oh, there's
like
over 600 individual parts
something.
of these bagpipes that have to be made by hand, and it's leather work. They're made out of stainless steel and African blackwood. So each one of these different components has to be hand tooled, handcrafted, and hand assembled in order to make the whole set. So yeah, it took every bit of 3 years.
3 years to make. Yeah, it's like an heirloom item now for your family. It's cool.
Really cool. He put this plate on it that said "Made for Cameron Lockey" by Aaron O'Hagan in 2021. I'm hopeful that maybe I can inspire one of my children to learn how to play this instrument and pass it down, something like that.
I can't even get my kids to want to play guitar. So good luck with that.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I wish my kids would play instruments. They just play Friday Night Funkin' on the computer. That's as close to musicality as we get in this family is electronic rhythm video games.
Yeah. So we got to see some pretty amazing landmarks while we were in Ireland. When we were up in the north of Ireland, we took a coastal drive from Belfast all the way around along the coast up to the Giant's Causeway, which is a pretty tourist target type place.
The hexagonal
Yeah,
rock things.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like these pillars of stone and this outcrop right out into the ocean. So that was pretty cool to see.
How board game themed of you.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I had to have some hexes in my life, you know? Yeah, we had a great time.
That's awesome.
However, also while I was traveling in Ireland, we like to take the Nintendo Switch with us for airplane rides and stuff like that.
So good for that.
Yeah, so I started playing a new game. It's kind of become this thing. Every time Casey and I travel somewhere and we take the Switch, I'm like, let's get a new game going.
Yeah.
Like Chris had told me about this game, so I started playing Celeste.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we've talked about this. We talked about how I generally like these platforming type games.
Your Switch survived the plane ride over to Ireland.
It did.
I don't know why I have never thought, like we just traveled for the longest vacation that I've ever gone on to California and we didn't take the Switch.
Oh my
I don't know
gosh.
why.
man.
I don't
It's
know why
great.
I've never
We do
thought
it
to
every
do
time.
that. Yeah.
It's great, yeah. So, yeah, it's really hard. It's,
Yeah.
it's a hard game.
Soul
Celeste is-
crushingly hard.
Yeah. That's one of the hardest games I've ever played.
Yeah.
There's this one aspect of it, though, that really makes it so much more tolerable, which is you can die as many times as you want, and it just poof, respawns you at the respawn location, which as you go through the game gets farther and farther
Right.
away from where you had gotten when you died.
For those of you that don't know, just so that we're clear, Celeste is a platforming game
Yep.
where you're trying to climb a mountain. So you start at the bottom of the mountain,
Right.
where it's the quote-unquote easiest.
Yeah.
And then you start to make your way towards the peak. And if you're familiar with games like Super Meat Boy and things like that, it's similar to that, where,
Yeah.
like Cameron said, you're going to die over and over and over again. But it's a quick respawn. You're trying to perfect your run to get to
Yeah.
the top. And I will say, too, it's a pixelated Switch game, so it's not got this huge overarching story, but it does explore some pretty interesting thoughts and themes with the main character, especially in regards to, like, mental health.
Yeah,
which
that's
is kind of
that's what I was
Yeah.
going to remark about. It's a storyline that I feel like if you've ever gone through anything really emotionally difficult in your life, you could kind of relate to, because it's non-specific. You don't really understand the details of what the female character is dealing with,
Right.
but you connect with the fact that she distrusts part of herself and she has to reintegrate.
She gets chased by herself.
Right,
It's
yeah.
part of the game, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I thought it was a pretty solid story for
It
an
is.
otherwise just a platforming game.
Yeah, in a nutshell, her climbing the mountain is kind of her fighting her inner demons, basically,
Yeah.
Right.
which is cool. What do you think about it, Jason? I know you have strong feelings about this game.
Yeah, I played this game a while ago, but absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
It is brutally hard. Like I think I had over 10,000 deaths to
Wow.
get to get to the end of just the normal game. Right. Well, so if you beat the normal game, there's what they call the B side. So every single level in the game has a brutally difficult. It's the same theme and mechanics of the original level, just new screens that are a lot harder. And then if you beat those, there are C sides, which are even harder than the B sides. I don't think I beat all the C sides. But yeah, it was super clever to me how they use the same simple mechanics, like you
Yeah.
were saying, to make new techniques and new things that you have to learn, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because all you have is the dash and the jump
Yep.
and the grab, right?
Yeah,
Which
that's
is
right.
almost as important too. Like
Right.
you can grab onto a wall and
But
cling
only
to
for
it,
so long before your stamina
right?
runs
And then
out.
you start
You
to
fall.
slide down.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this gives me more cred or less, but I played through the whole game on a MacBook keyboard.
Whoa.
Oh my gosh.
It was challenging.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can imagine.
That sounds awful.
Yep.
Isn't it interesting how we're drawn to a game with simple mechanisms can be so fun and so good? Like I said,
That
just
sounds
Yeah.
familiar.
sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even in the electronic media.
Even if the theme is a little bit pasted on.
Exactly. Exactly. It's kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like being drawn to these really simple, elegant designs. Celeste is a highly regarded game. I think that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a tough one to beat, but I know, Jason, you and I have been playing a game that you kind of put me on to, so I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah.
Called Baba Is You.
That's right.
Let's talk about that one.
Strangest name of a game I've played in a while.
This
but
game is super weird, people.
This game, it's cool though.
Yeah.
So basically, it's an old 8-bit graphic style puzzle game.
Yeah, indie
And-
game.
Yeah, you're this little white rabbit thing. I don't know what Baba is,
Mouse
but
creature.
yeah, named Baba, and you move around on a square grid, and
Baba or you?
Both.
Baba is you. So,
but sometimes you're not Baba.
Right.
Sometimes you're a rock, and then rock is you. But anyway, I'm getting ahead.
Yeah, you're jumping ahead. You're confusing everybody. So the most basic example is that you are Baba. Baba is you, and your goal is to get to the flag. And the way that you know this is that the rules to the level are written on the screen. So they're blocks. Like Baba is and you are blocks on the screen. And so as long as Baba is you, those blocks are lined up on the screen, then Baba is you. The simplest example would be Baba is you and flag is win, right? And there's a flag on the screen, and so if you move Baba to the flag, then you win because the flag is win, right? Where it gets super clever is that most of the levels beyond that require you to manipulate the rules of the level in order to beat the level. So there'll be a river in the center, and it says water is sink. So if you step on the river, you're going to sink, and Baba drowns. But you can change the rules and say water is you, right? And now all of a sudden,
or water is push,
right? And now all of a sudden, when you move the arrow keys, you're moving the river instead of Baba.
You can push the water,
right?
Wow.
And so there's just so many clever combinations, and each world introduces new words. Yeah, super clever how they do it.
Super clever and can be super frustrating, at least for me, because I'm not a computer programmer type person. I imagine that kind of background could really help you in this game. But I always get the commands flipped in my head. I'm like, okay, I need a key, and then I turn Baba is key. I turn myself into a key, but then you is nothing at that point, so I just die. I just turn into a key and die, and I'm like, ah!
Yeah.
It's like trying to figure out these mental gymnastics. If you could have a recording playing of what is going on in your brain while you're playing this game, it would probably be hilarious to listen to, because I'm like, okay, Baba is rock, rock is push, push Baba, rock is just, it's crazy.
But rock is not me, no! Yeah, it's hilarious, and it has some humor sprinkled through it, and some of the ways it structures the levels, and
oh, for sure,
yeah. But there are 200 plus levels. As far as I know, I have not reached them. I managed to get over 100.
Does it have?
Oh gosh,
yeah. The worlds just get harder and harder as you go through. But I think I've cracked 100. But
I'm about a third of the way.
I've hit a brick wall at this point. So wall is me at this point. But I'm going to keep trying. We'll see.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of game, and this is how I've started playing it, is you just turn it on and you try to solve like one or two a day and then just stop. Because you'll be tempted to continue to try to go, and then you just end up getting frustrated.
And you start talking like that
It's
to your
so
family.
hard, and then it gets in your head like a bad song. All day I'm thinking Baba is rock, and yeah, you just play it in
Chris
spurts.
is asleep.
That's right. It's a good one, though. I suggest checking it out. I think it's really fun.
Yeah, cool. What have you been up to lately, Chris?
Oh, yeah. So I've got something fun to talk about. I'm excited about this one. It's not a game, though. So I'm going to be talking about a show that I've been watching lately. Shows have dried up a little bit. Haven't been much on, but just recently on Netflix, this new show hit their top 10 called Archive 81. And this show is just right down my alley. Now, I know, Jason, I think you've watched maybe the first episode.
Yeah.
So you've just gotten started.
Horror, more or less. Suspense.
More or less. It's horror, but it's not gory. So I can just go ahead and tell you that right out the gate. There's not a lot of gratuitous blood. There's a little, but it's not super gory. It's not like a zombie show or something. But it's centered around a character by the name of Dan. And he's got a really interesting occupation. He's actually a professional at restoring damaged old audio-video equipment, like old cassette tapes and old videotapes that have been damaged in floods or fires. He restores them and makes them playable again. So Dan gets hired by this really enigmatic
A shell company.
strange company called LMG, which when they Google the company, they can't find anything about it, but it looks like some huge Fortune 500 company. And they hire Dan to work at this compound that they own that's in the middle of nowhere, New York, Western New York somewhere.
The Catskills.
In the Catskills. And they hire him to restore 20 damaged/burned videotapes that were recovered from a building called the Visser. Okay? These videotapes were shot by a college-age girl by the name of Melody Pendress in 1994, because they're videotapes, right? Not on your iPhone or anything like that. And she says that she moved into the Visser to do a project on the history of the building and its residents. So she has this audio-video documentary of the building prior to it burning down in 1994. So she records people in the building, she interviews them, etc., etc. But to make a long story short with no spoilers, things just get really strange from there with the events surrounding the recordings and the residents, why they live there, what they're into. Like I said, I don't want to give too much away without
Weird things start happening in the videos.
Weird things start happening in the videos, and then begins to learn that he is somehow connected to this girl in 1994 when he was like 7, and to the events that happened in this building. So he becomes obsessed with trying to figure out.
Spoiler alert?
What's that?
Spoiler alert?
No, you learn that in like the first 20 minutes of the show.
That's kind of like the big reveal moment at the end of the first episode.
Nah, whatever. It's fine. Got to give the people something to want to watch the show, man.
Okay, fine.
So that's all I'm going to say about it. But actually, I will say one more thing about it. So it's cool in that it cuts back and forth between Dan and Melody. So you're not just watching Melody on the tapes. You're actually watching her in real time.
Yeah,
like it goes backwards to 1994, and she's moving around with the camera in her hand. And it's following her in the story in that way. Like I said, I think it's great. It's definitely horror, but I think it's more psychological and unsettling.
Isolation.
The isolation, the compound is creepy.
Okay.
It's really cool. It reminded me a lot of 1922, which I mentioned on the show before in that way, in that it's more of like a psychological type of horror.
Does that make it like a thriller or a horror?
It's a little of both.
Okay.
It's mystery. You're trying, and again, this is another thing I love in shows. You're trying to figure out what is going on here. Every episode, you're slowly
does it literally scare you?
I find it to be scary,
okay.
But it's not like a jump scare show. It's not going to jump out and scare you. It's more like, don't go in there. I wouldn't go in there kind of a thing. Yeah, it's good.
I started watching it when I was home alone, and
oh boy,
it was like midnight, and I was like, I don't know if I should keep watching this.
Yeah, it creates a really eerie feeling around the compound and the Visser building itself.
Okay.
It's one of these shows where the buildings almost have a character in and of themselves. Cool stuff. Really, really like this one. Probably one of the best I've watched since Raised by Wolves, so I would check it out.
Raised by Wolves Season 2 is out now.
Coming up soon. I'll be talking about that.
I need to jump back on
It's
Raised
out
by
now.
Wolves.
Oh, is it out now?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think I probably got 7 or 8 episodes into the first season, and I just don't have that much alone time to watch TV.
Right. Yeah. Not Casey's kind of show.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
Well, those are our thoughts on video games.
Exactly. 3 short mini reviews.
That's right. So we always have a cocktail, and we've got a 3-player episode going on this week. So tell us about our cocktail.
Mine's almost gone at this point. Do I get another one?
Yeah, do you like it? So this is a
pretty
pretty
good.
unique one, right?
Okay.
So this one's called the AAA, because again, as Cameron alluded to, if you didn't pick it up from the title, we're talking about 3-player games. And this is an interesting one. So Jason picked up on it right away, what was in this. If you're familiar with absinthe and what it tastes like, you'll know that it gives drinks a licorice-y type flavor to it. And this one definitely has a pretty strong licorice flavor to it. The recipe calls for an ounce of absinthe. Unless you love licorice,
That's a lot of
I
absinthe.
would discourage that highly.
I put a couple drops of absinthe in a drink before, and it's overpowering.
A little goes a long way. So I would recommend half an ounce of absinthe and an ounce and a half of apple juice instead of a 1-to-1 ratio. Otherwise, it's just going to knock you off your feet. So it has those two, and then an ounce of water, actually, to dilute it out a little bit. Half an ounce of orgeat, which is almond syrup. A quarter ounce of lime juice, shaken and served. Pretty straightforward.
Cool. And it's called what?
It's good.
AAA.
AAA. There we go.
Yeah.
Good choice. All right. We're doing 3-player games today, like we said.
Yep.
So we normally set things up a little bit, talk about the theme or the designer that we're talking about for the day. 3-player games, there's not a ton to talk about, but do you guys have anything that stands out in your mind when you think about 3-player games?
Yeah, not particularly. I mean, I think you alluded to this earlier, Jason, in the episode, but the main reason that I picked to do this episode was just because it was the first time that we were going to have been together again in such a long time.
Yeah.
And it just made sense to do 3-player games. Me personally, I gravitate towards bigger groups. 4 is a sweet spot for me. I certainly don't mind 3 at all. I will say, though, 3-player only games, of which there are not many, but we are reviewing one tonight that you can only play at 3, tend to have, for whatever reason, a hard time to get to the table. I don't know why that is. I think you just got to plan for it. But they are kind of notorious for being hard to get to the table for whatever reason. But yeah, not much to say about it, honestly. I'm just looking forward to talk about it. I think they serve an interesting niche, each one of these, in the right circumstance.
Yeah, I think it's also probably valuable to point out that there are a lot of games that can be played with 3 players.
Yep.
And we've played a lot of games for this podcast at a 3-player count. But what we're trying to focus on here is games that we think might be particularly well suited for play at 3 players.
Definitely.
Because some of these games can accommodate other player counts, either 2 or 4.
4, yeah.
Okay, but these we think are probably geared mostly for 3.
Agree.
Yeah. If I had to say anything about them, I think it's interesting. Games that are designed specifically for 3 players usually have some sort of mechanics that take advantage of that 3-player nature,
yes.
like the triangular aspect of having 3 people playing.
They
like
tend to be asymmetric.
Right, where you're always having to monitor what your neighbors are doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I like that aspect of it because it's a subtle twist, but it's like an additional twist to the gameplay that just having 3 and it being specifically 3 lends to. So
Agree.
Okay, cool.
All right.
We'll just get into the game.
Let's do it.
In the game of Seikatsu, a word that means life in Japanese, players tend a shared garden between each of the pagodas and compete to have the most breathtaking view of the finished garden. Take turns drawing and playing garden tiles that feature both a bird and a flower to create flocks of birds and rows of flowers as seen from your pagoda. Who has the best view of the garden? It's all a matter of perspective.
Seikatsu, published in 2017 by IDW Games. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 1,781. Not too far down. Designers of this game are Matt Loomis, who I checked on BGG on this guy, and he has a couple of other more unpopular designs. I'd never heard of him before.
Seikatsu with Loomis.
Seikatsu with Loomis.
Loomis with Loomis.
And then Isaac Shalev. So I actually do know this guy. He's not a very big game designer. He's got a few designs, but he actually does a podcast. So there's a podcast called On Board Games that's mostly hosted by a guy named Donald Dennis, but Isaac Shalev is often on this podcast. So if you ever want to hear him and his thoughts on games and what he likes, you can check that out.
Cool.
So I'll go ahead and say all 3 of these games that we're reviewing today, I handpicked ahead of time. I knew I was going to review these for these episodes just because I felt like they fit so well. I had them in mind for a while. Or at least I had played all of these before we formally reviewed them. However, I will point out that one of our guild members, Scott, who I've mentioned before on here, was my travel agent when I was in Boston. He was the one who was telling me all the places to go. This is Who's Your Daddy on Instagram.
That's right.
Suggested that we take a look at this game too, so I just wanted to mention him as well, that he had pointed this out as a pretty good game.
Cool.
Sweet.
All right. Brief rule summary for Seikatsu. In Seikatsu, the players are tending to a shared garden where they take turns placing circular tiles into the garden to score points for planting flowers and placing birds. The play area is composed of an array of 36 small circular areas arranged in a hexagonal configuration, because it's not a board game unless it's hexagonal, right? The array is composed of 7 columns of circles, with the outermost columns consisting of 4 circles, and as you move inwardly, the columns add a circle to a maximum of 6 in the innermost 3 columns. Each player will be sitting at one of these vertices of this hex board and will have 7 columns radiating out from their sitting area. In addition to the board, there's also a bag which holds 36 tiles. 32 of the tiles have 2 pieces of information on them: a type of bird, of which there are 4 unique types, and a type of flower, of which there are also 4 unique types. The remaining 4 tiles are koipon tiles. We'll talk more about this in a minute. A player's turn is pretty simple in this game. Each player starts the game with 2 randomly drawn tiles from the bag, and on their turn they will place one of these 2 tiles onto the board. After they place, they will draw back up to 2 tiles in hand, and their turn is complete. That's it, pretty straightforward. When placing a tile, the tile must be placed adjacent to a tile already on the board. If the type of bird present on the tile you are placing is the same as a bird present on any adjacent tiles already on the board, you will score 1 point for the placed tile, plus an additional point for every matching bird tile adjacent to that placed tile. That's the only point scoring that occurs during the game. Once every tile has been placed and the board is completely filled, the players will individually evaluate all 7 of the columns radiating out from their sitting area. For each column, they will be assessing the most common flower type for each column, with the player scoring progressively more points for same types of flowers in each column. So for example, each player will score 3 points if they have at most 2 of the same flower in a column, whereas they will score 15 points if they have 5 of the same kind of flower in a column. Lastly, I should mention the 4 koi tiles, When placed on the board, the koi tiles are wild and will act as any type of bird that you want at the moment they are placed. Additionally, at the end of the game, the koi tiles can be whatever kind of flower you want them to be when evaluating the column for scoring. And that's basically it. It's a pretty straightforward game. Highest score wins the game. And that's generally, pretty much completely, how you play
thoroughly
Seikatsu. You can play the game right now, honestly.
Yeah.
So it's pretty straightforward. All right, so I don't think it's any surprise to our listeners or people who are into the kind of games that we're into, especially when we talk about older games, which we often do on the show, because, again, we're talking about hidden gems. They're usually not the hotness anymore, kind of out of the public eye at this point when we get to them and start discussing them. But a lot of these games are not lookers, right? They don't look great, especially the older games. They're just cardboard shits, pretty boring, pretty plain art. They look pretty bad most of the time. But to us, we're of the type of gamer that doesn't really matter a lot to us, at least to me. If the game has great mechanisms and it's fun to play, I can overlook a lot of production issues. With that being said, I think the production in this game is a lot different from that. Okay? So how did you guys feel about the production in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. There's not a whole lot of components in this game, right? There's just the chips and the board. And the board, it looks nice. The art is nice. The chips themselves, though, they took those up a notch, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're not poker chips, but they're like the plastic,
like
weighty.
ceramic.
Yeah, they're that Bakelite.
I would say,
hard
too,
plastic.
Just looking at the box of this game, it looks like what you would expect from some of the hotness, right? Like from a highly produced Kickstarter. Even the way that the components package into the tray is like one of the few trays that you actually kept, because it looks like a lotus flower or something.
Yeah.
They actually did a good job.
And it's functional.
Yeah.
I maybe, out of the 1,100 games I own, probably kept 20 inserts.
Right.
I just toss them because they're usually junk, but this one's pretty good.
Yeah, it's very well done. I mean, it's a very attractive looking game.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think the playing pieces super satisfying. They have that tactile feel to them. It's just really fun. I agree with Jason. I think the art looks really good. I think it does a really good job of capturing the feel that this game, I think, is trying to capture, of it being very relaxing and kind of breezy and conversational. Turns are simple. You're just playing a tile, and when we were playing it, we're chatting. We're still thinking about things, but it's pleasurable to play, I guess.
Sure.
That's how I would describe it. Jason, what did you think about some of the strategic elements of this game? Is it just good looks, or is there some things to think about here?
Yeah, we'll get into the strategy versus tactical nature of it in a little bit, I'm sure, probably. But I'll say up front, I enjoyed the tension between the grabbing points in-game versus going for the end game, right? Ideally, your play in this game is place a tile that scores you a couple points right away, but also helps you out with the end game scoring, and if you're lucky, screws up your opponents at the end game scoring.
The perfect turn.
Right.
Yeah.
The perfect turn, right? But I found that interesting, having to think through all three of those aspects and weight them individually, of like, okay, well, I can go here and get a lot of immediate points, but it doesn't help me as much in the end game, or I can go here and get a lot of end game points, but it maybe doesn't hinder my opponents, or maybe it's helping my opponents. You have to constantly be looking down the other directions of the board to see how many flowers of this type does Cameron have in this row. You know, I enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that is a little bit surprising, maybe isn't the right word, but almost deceptive, right? It's almost deceptively simple, because you look at it and you go, great, I have two tiles. That means I have A or B, right? It's such a simple decision. I can either choose A or I can choose B, and whether one or the other is optimal to play right now is extremely obvious. The thing is, and we talked about this a little bit, I think in, what's it called? Terra Nova, right? Where, yes, you can move a guy, but you can move him anywhere.
Yeah, right.
And it changes from the beginning of the game to the end of the game as more and more tiles get covered up, but especially early on. Yes, you can take that one tile and maybe it's, the one that you want to play, but you can put it anywhere.
Sure.
And you don't have to put it next to the one that matches the birds that are of that same bird on the board. You can put it wherever you want as long as it touches another tile, and maybe there's strategic reasons to do so. And I thought that's an interesting element of the game, of divorcing your mind from, I need to put this where the other red birds are, to, I need to put this where I need it to be in order to score the most points.
Yeah, I agree with everything you both have said. I think there are three main things you're thinking about here: matching birds, flowers, and blocking, right?
Yeah.
And I did enjoy that aspect of, man, how can I really mess over my opponents right now? because that's fun,
Maybe
right?
almost a little too much, Chris.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So this is probably a little bit of a minor con for me, but I like that the game gives you that option of blocking, and I do think that in some cases it's definitely the right play. Like if you see one of your opponents sitting on 4 of the same type or 5 of the same type, you need to try to lay one in that column so they don't get 5 or 6 of the same type. That's a huge number of points, right? But I did find as I played this game that as much as I enjoy blocking, if you concern yourself with blocking too much and not helping yourself win, you're just kind of helping that third person win the game, I think. So I think if blocking is occurring, hopefully it's being shared by everybody, and the other people aren't like, sweet, you blocked them, I'll just put another one down here and score more points for myself, right? I guess what I'm saying is blocking, it seemed to me, the more that I played it, which I've played this game many, many times now, probably up into 10 times now, it seems that blocking is just something that you do maybe when it's just an added benefit to something that was going to benefit you to begin with some rare exceptions.
Yeah, I think turn order affects that too. If it's obvious so-and-so's going to maybe get a 5 or a 6 there, depending on who you're sitting next to, you could be like, well, I'm just going to do my thing. Enjoy, you blocking.
Right, well, yeah, and Jason and I got into a dispute about that.
In a 3-player game, that's kind of an important thing to be aware of, I guess.
Yeah. I kind of feel like in games like this, the person to your left is your responsibility, although, you don't want to say that at the start of the game, right? But I was like, Jason, why didn't you block Cameron? He's like, why didn't you do it? And I was like, well, why don't you do it, Why do I always have to be playing defense in this game?
Yeah, you can choose to lose then.
You're going to lose too.
And you guys did.
We did.
A few times.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
I like winning this game.
I was wondering how long it was going to take you to mention that.
So what are some of the things that maybe we didn't like as much about this game?
I would say for me, like I said, I did have the advantage, I guess, of playing this game more than you all because I've played it with my family quite a bit. Just seeing it play out many, many times. And I will say that when you're just drawing 2 tiles, you have no hand, really. You're holding one back. But normally the one you're holding back not because you're going to strategically play it at the right time, just because it's not good for you this particular turn, right? And so because of that, it's got a very tactical nature, right? There's not really a lot of planning in this game. You can certainly plan to try to have a lot of flowers in one column, but if you just don't draw the flower types you need out of the bag, you're never going to maximize that column, right? Because it's very much dependent on a bag draw. And I think for me, that's really the biggest con for me, is I just found that I was beholden to the bag pool more than I wanted to be. I always felt I looked at my 2 tiles, I looked at the board. Yes, I had things to think about. What's the best play? But oftentimes I felt like I was making the optimal play, if not close to the optimal play. And then when I grabbed that bag, I was just thinking, please, please, please draw this type of bird or draw this type of flower. And then either did or it didn't, And after a while, that can become frustrating, at least for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I kept looking for whether or not there was strategy in this game to not always going with the play that scores you the most. And by most, I mean not just like the most immediate points, but scores you collectively the most immediate points plus benefit to you in the end game plus hindering your opponents. Right? Because it's not that difficult to figure out. You only have 2 chips. You can look at the most probable places that you're going to place those chips on the board and figure out, okay, well, this one scores me 11 points. This one scores me 10 points. And I kept trying to think, is there merit to trying to play in a different style than always going for that? And I don't think there is. Unless there's just some genius strategy out there that I'm missing, right? And so I think I agree with you, Chris. I wondered, I always do this, I always try to fix games in my mind. I wondered if they had made this more like a draft, like if there's a chain of 3 or 4 chips always at the top of the board, and instead of drawing blind, you can choose from those 4, right? If that would add to it.
More choices, right?
Right, because you can see what's coming. Exactly. You can see, okay, there's another tile right there that I need.
A plan or a strategy, right?
Right.
But then when you might you get into the situation where you're like, well, now we're just beholden to turn order. That one flipped over. That was random. So that one flipped over, but then you were able to grab that before me, and now we're beholden to turn order.
Quite possibly. I don't think Jason is saying that's necessarily a solution. I think he's just spitballing potential ideas that in addition to other things.
That introduces its own problems.
I think the thing that Jason is saying, though, in that example, is that example that he just gave is trying to open up some sort of strategic element to the game. Because at this point, the game feels like 90% tactics and 10% strategy by like trying to line those flowers up. But again, if you don't draw the right tiles, it's all for naught.
I mean,
right?
I think that's fair, but I think saying that it's all for naught is a bit of an overstatement, right? Because what I found myself doing is the points that I scored in those flower rows, for example, at the end of the game, weren't even, in many cases, ones that I placed there. I found myself opening my mind up and saying, all right, this one's my yellow flowers row, right? And there's
doing the same.
And there's one there, right? So I'm going to try to put another yellow one there because there's already one there. Then you both would place a purple one there. And I'm like, that's my purple one now.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
And I would change my plan, right? And like that's where I feel like the tactical element comes in of, okay, I was going to do that, but I can't do that anymore. And I didn't draw yellow this time, but there's 3 points that I can score right there, and I can beef up my red column. I wasn't looking for specific tiles. I was just like, I know I'm going to need these birds in these colors, so I just need to sort them as best as I possibly can, I guess.
Definitely. Everything you just said, I agree with. And similar thought processes were passing through my brain as well when we were playing it.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, why did that frustrate you so much, but it didn't frustrate me? And it wasn't because
you were saying things like, oh, that's my yellow row. And I was thinking the same thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to go for yellow in this row. I'm going to go here. And then I wasn't drawing the right stuff, right? I would draw something that just didn't help me. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just block. And then by the time I got it back around to me, now somebody's throwing a different color in my yellow row and diluted it down, right? And so I think we're all kind of doing that back and forth. And probably the simplest example that I can use to explain my thought of this game, and this is going to sound worse than I think the game actually is, would be like you and me and Jason taking a quarter and flipping it 10 times. And Jason and I flipped heads 5 times, and you flipped heads 6 times. That's how this game feels to me. I just feel like it's always going to be really close, and we're all making an intelligent play every time because we learned how the game works. And then at that point, it's just who drew just marginally better at the right time to come out just ahead. Because with one exception, now there's one game you smoked us. I'm not sure how it happened. But with one exception,
I think that was the one that we fought over who was going to block him, and neither of us did, and so he got like 21 points.
I got a 6.
Yeah.
Which the difference between getting 5 and getting 6, it goes from 15 to a 21.
It's a huge,
6 points.
if you do that, you've won, right?
Yeah.
But with one exception, all of our scores were tight.
Yeah.
Within 5 points, pretty much every time.
I think that's fair.
You know, again, that's always a little worry.
Maybe I didn't get as frustrated because, and I think this is a merit to the game.
Because you won a lot?
No.
You're like an Amadeus at this game.
I get frustrated when I lose at a game when I've invested a lot in that game. We were turning this game around in 15 minutes. Right?
Yep.
So I think even if I hadn't, let's say, been marginally lucky, assuming that we were all playing optimally.
With the addition of good play. With good play.
If I had been losing or getting second place, it wouldn't have bothered me nearly as much because, frankly, it's still kind of that enjoyable, laid-back pace type of game.
Yeah.
And it's not an incredibly large investment. And so it doesn't get my blood going if I'm not doing as well as I would like.
Yeah, my final thoughts kind of revolved around that a little bit in terms of, I think I agree with everything we've said about there not being a whole lot of long-term strategy to this game, but I think you have to ask the question, what is this game trying to be?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Who is this game for?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that for the person who's looking to sit down and play a 15 to 20 minute game that they can learn the rules to in 30 seconds and just take it easy, enjoy, have conversation
Chill
while they're
game on
playing
vacation,
it, which we did. We enjoyed just being able to converse while we played this, and you're not like heads down, racking your brain to figure out what to do. I think that is a legitimate use case, right? For a game like this, right?
It's like a platform for the game.
Now, my style of game and what I enjoy playing is generally a little bit meatier than something like this, right? So, I don't know, I struggled with my final number for this one because I think it's produced well. It fits that niche, I guess, of being a short, easygoing game. And I think there are a lot of people out there who will enjoy it. I think that for me personally, I settled in the 3 territory of like, I would gladly play it again, and maybe that puts it in the 4 category. I don't know, but I would probably get bored with it over time. And so I had to settle into the 3. If I'm going to play a game like this, there are other options out there that add a little bit more depth that would draw me in more so than this one. So landed on a 3.
I'll go next, because a lot of my thoughts mirror Jason's, to be quite honest. Man, I wanted to like this game. I really did. It's just such a great looking game. It's got such a great feel to it. And as we just mentioned, it does serve a really good niche of that light, conversational, easygoing game. It's great for that. I agree with Jason. I was going to say the same thing if he hadn't. I think there are a lot of people who would really like this game. This would be a great game for family, mom, dad, grandma, aunts, uncles who don't normally play games like this. This would be a great one for that to at least dip your toe into, I think. But for me, the problem with this game is I just never felt clever playing the game. And for me, tension and cleverness are two words I throw around a lot, and that's what I'm looking for in games. Did I feel tense? Did I feel clever at all in this game? Did I ever do a move where people were like, whoa, I never saw that coming, or whoa, that was really cool? That just doesn't happen in this game.
We still think you're clever, Chris.
Okay, well, thanks.
You didn't feel clever.
I just want people to think I'm smart.
Drawing out of the bag.
Yeah, it's just so tactical. I felt powerless to change my destiny in this game. I just felt myself hoping. I've said that before, I think, in Shanghai when we reviewed it. I just was like, oh, I hope I roll this. I hope. No. For me, a game of this weight and this feel, 10 times out of 10, I would just rather play Rumus if I'm going to play a game with this kind of weightiness to it. I think it's just superior in every way. But again, looks great. I see a point for it. I think people would like it, but for me, it's just okay. I'm going to give it a 3 as well.
All right, fair enough. So I think if this game required more of a time commitment, it would be worthy of lower marks than I'm going to give it. However, it's a short game with very few decisions, and those decisions matter. I appreciated the fact that it's not 100% clear what the optimal move is from turn to turn. There are a lot of possibilities early in the game, as I mentioned, and sometimes you have to exclusively set yourself up for end-game points only on your turn, rather than just going for the end-game points. I think this game easily falls into the filler category like we're talking about. So with those things in mind, I'm happy to give Seikatsu a 4.
Nice.
Cool.
I knew you liked it. I thought you might give it a 5.
Yeah,
You seem to really be enjoying it when you were pounding us into the ground.
Well, and I think always try to separate the merits of a game as a design versus how much fun I'm having, and I try to weight those two together and into a composite number. And so for me, I don't think that it has some of the merits of a lot of the other games that we're playing, but like I said, it falls into that filler category. It's lighthearted, it's fun, it's accessible to other audiences, and it's pretty fun to beat you guys every once in a while.
It's awesome. You want mine?
Sure.
Nice. We'll talk after the episode.
Sweet.
All right. Well, where can this game be found?
Yeah, for a game that was only published in, 2017, it's become pretty rare-ish. No online copies, retail copies that I could find. There are 7 copies on BGG, so you can find it there. I would have to think that this game is sitting on the shelf of friendly local game stores around the country, because it's just not that old, and I feel like I've seen it around, but it's become somewhat rarish online, so if this sounds interesting to you, I would grab it sooner rather than later. It's pretty affordable at this point still.
All right, those are our thoughts on Seikatsu.
From the green hills of the Scottish Highlands comes a card game stuffed full of fun. The goal is to simply play all of your cards first. But beware, hidden in the misty crags and subtle strategies that require mastery of tricky combinations, wild cards, and bombs! Sharing a common lineage with the ancient card games of China, Haggis is a delicacy reserved for tables of 2 or 3.
Nice. I was waiting for that accent to come out.
Oh, yes.
Bombs.
Gotta love those bombs.
And kudos to Cameron, his Uilleann Pipe debut.
Yes.
The backing
Finally
track.
made it on the podcast.
Playing in the background of the reading was Cameron playing the Uilleann Pipes. Fantastic, man.
Thanks, guys.
You've gotten so freaking good at those things. 20 years. You've mastered them in like a year, it feels like. It's crazy.
Oh, mastered is hardly true, but
you've become
progress.
competent in a year. How about that?
I'll accept that.
Very, very good, man.
We've probably insulted a bunch of masters of the instrument by saying that you've mastered it. But
I know a few that are amazing, so yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Haggis. Published in 2010 by Indie Boards and Cards, designed by Sean Ross, and currently ranked on BGG 1011.
Ooh.
It's actually pretty low.
Just outside the top 1,000.
Yeah, pretty low there. All right. So, Haggis is a...
Wait. Got to give some cred.
Oh, yeah. All right.
So, as I mentioned, this was another game I knew about. I've had this game for years. I knew it was going to be played on this episode. However, I will mention that 2 episodes in a row, James Geist from Dad's on a Map
Go James.
recommended that we review Haggis at some point. So, here we go. James, here's another one for you.
Nice. Yeah, 2 episodes in a row. All right. Haggis is a climbing card game for 2 or 3 players. We are reviewing it really only at 3.
Correct.
The deck of cards consists of 5 suits with numbers 2 through 10. Some of these cards, the 3s, the 5s, the 7s, and the 9s, are worth 1 point each, while all the other cards are worth nothing. In each hand, 3 cards will be set aside. This is the Haggis, while the remaining cards are dealt evenly to the players. Each player, in addition to their dealt cards, will also receive 1 each of a jack, a queen, and a king. The jack being worth 2 points, queens being worth 3 points, kings worth 5 points. I'll go into a little bit of details on what climbing games are in general here in a second. To begin a hand, up until a player plays their first card or cards to a trick, they may choose to declare a bet of either 15 or 30 points. This bet, like calling Tichu or Grand Tichu in Tichu, is awarded to the player if they manage to go out, meaning rid their hand of cards, before any other player. If the player does not go out first, however, each of their opponents will receive the bet amount while they receive nothing. So in playing a hand, a series of tricks will be played, with the winner of the trick leading the next trick, until all but 1 player has no cards left in their hand. The winner of each trick collects the cards played to that trick and will score for any point cards collected at the end of the hand. So I said this is a climbing game. We've mentioned Tichu already. If you're familiar with that game, Haggis is going to sound very similar. However, for those listeners who are like, a climbing game, what the heck is that? Let me explain. If you're used to trick-taking games like Spades or Rook, you're used to playing single cards, usually where you have to follow the suit that's led unless you don't have that suit. In a climbing game, there are suits, and they play a role, but players need not follow suit in a trick. Rather, they must follow the led combination.
Right.
Combinations come in different forms, depending on the game, but the ones for Haggis are a single card, a sequence, which is a 2 of a kind, 3 of a kind, etc. Another combination is the running sequence, which is, for example, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, right? You can play as many of these as you want.
Suited.
But the suits must, the suits must be consistent. And then final combination is a straight, so 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but these must be all of the same suit and must be a minimum of 3 cards. So once a combination is led, the only way a player can play over that combination is by playing the exact same type of combination except of a higher rank. Players will play in this fashion or pass until all but 1 player has passed, at which point that player wins the trick. So I mentioned the 3 face cards, the Jack, Queen, and King that each player has. First thing to note about these is that they are face up in front of each player until they're used. So this is public information as to what you have left. Second, these are wild cards, so they can be used to complete sequences or other combinations. And lastly, they can also be used to construct special combinations known as bombs.
Bombs?
Bombs are special combinations of cards which are higher ranked than all other normal combinations that I already listed. The only thing that can beat a bomb is a higher ranked bomb. It is important to note that if a player wins a trick with a bomb, they will keep the lead for the next trick, but they have to give all the cards from that trick to the player who is winning the trick prior to the bomb being played.
And that, I will chime in, that's tournament rules. So that's a variant, but that's the variant we recommend.
Gotcha.
There's the standard rule is you can give them to whoever you want.
Oh.
And that it's just too chaotic and mean, I think,
Right.
for what is a pretty strategic game.
And, yeah.
Gotcha. That's pretty much it. A standard game is played to 350 points, and that's essentially how you play Haggis. So, because
you can play 1 of a kind, 2 of a kind, 3 of a kind, 4 of a kind, 5 of a kind.
All right, you know what?
Oh my gosh.
All right, fine, edit it. Trying to be.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's thoroughly how you play Haggis.
It's trying to be thorough. All right. So, because it's a climbing game, like we've said, this draws a lot of parallels to Tichu.
Yep.
And we love Tichu around here. We play a ton. So, what were some of the biggest differences that you guys had to adjust for or change the way you were thinking about the card play here as you played this game?
Yeah, I will say, when we first started playing this game, I was looking at my hand like, I don't know what I can even do here. I don't know what combinations I can do. The straights all have to be suited. I can't really make any. I'm used to being able to make 4 and 5 card combos, and then you have these 3 wild cards in front of you, and it's like, how and when should I play those? If I use them as wilds, then I'm giving up my bomb. That's a lot to wrap your brain around when your brain is oriented toward teach you.
Yes, for sure. There's definitely some differences, and especially within the 3-player game, the 5th suit, right? It just introduces more colors and cards,
exactly.
right? I definitely hear what you're saying. Yeah, I think for me, probably the biggest difference between this game and Teach You, which I love Teach You. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I think it's a fantastic design, but I will say in Teach You, not all the time, but at least once a game this happens to somebody, usually multiple times, somebody will just get that hand dealt to them that it's just so easy. It's just like you're calling Teach You confidently with no fear because you know you're going out first and nobody's going to stop you unless somebody has just some statistically anomalous hand in their hand.
Yeah.
We call them mindless hands in Teach You. It's just like, I knew I was going out first.
Yeah.
I had the dragon, the phoenix, and 2 aces and a big
have
run.
to call Teach You.
Right.
Yeah.
It was just easy. In this game, what's so clever about it, like what Jason was just describing, is everybody has that Jack, Queen, King in front of them, which can be used as bombs. So in this game, everyone starts every single hand with a bomb.
Yep.
At least one bomb.
At least one.
Right.
If not more than one, right? Whereas in Teach You, there will be lots of hands where nobody has a bomb.
Right.
So it injects a lot of fear
Oh, yeah.
into this game, because you can bet in this game to go out first or second like in Teach You, but it's much scarier in this game because there's so much bomb potential on the board,
Yep.
which to me integrated a lot of tension into the game, which I really liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I forgot to mention in the rules, when a player goes out, when they rid their hand of cards, they're going to score 5 points for every card in the hand of the person who has the most cards left when they go out.
Which can be a ton.
It can be a lot of points.
Yeah.
This is actually where you make most of your points in this game. It's
Yeah.
not by taking tricks.
Yeah.
Right, and so that adds in a tension, though. So there's 50 points in the deck, which you can claim, but there's also a ton of points to be had by going out quickly.
Yes.
Right, so that speed element is there. The longer it takes you to go out, the less cards your opponents are going to have, the less lucrative that becomes. I think the bombs add in just a craziness factor to that, because when you win a trick with a bomb, you're giving away all the points.
Yeah.
Right? And usually your bomb is a Jack, Queen, King type of bomb, which is a lot of points, right? Because they're worth 2, 3, and 5 points each. So I like that tension of, well, do I go for the card points? Do I just try to grab as many cards as I can, forget going out first? Or do I try to spend all the bombs I have, maybe give away a lot of points on cards, but grab a lot of points by going out early?
Right,
And
or
I
try to
enjoy
prevent
that part.
somebody else from going out before or going out early as well. And yeah, you mentioned giving up the points when you play your wild cards as bombs, but you're also giving up control. And Cameron, I think you were alluding to this a little bit in your first point, which I think we have to elaborate on this a little bit more, because I think it's just so incredibly clever in this game, in that you're constantly trying to figure out, do I play one of these wild cards as part of a combination in my hand so I can get more cards out? But when I do that, if I only have 2 cards in front of me and Cameron and Jason have 3 of their wild cards in front of them, now they both have a bomb that can beat any bomb I can produce.
Yep.
And now that's hanging over my head for the rest of the hand. And so you're constantly weighing, is it beneficial for me to use this wild card as part of a combination, or sometimes even as a single? Right?
Yeah.
Really, the king wild card is kind of like the dragon in Teach You, right? It's the highest single card.
Right.
Right? And so it can be tempting when singles are being played to play your king out, but now you've lost so much power from a bomb standpoint, right?
It can get you control, but you can't keep that control necessarily.
Yeah,
But
it's real cool.
But it also adds in to my point earlier of trying to grab points. If you play that king as the dragon, you're saying basically, I'm either going to take this trick with the king and keep my 5 points.
Right.
Or I'm going to force someone to play a bomb over me,
And take
which is
those
going to give me
points.
even more points.
Right.
Because I get to keep the trick because I was winning before the bomb got played. And so
Right.
I think that's really clever.
Well,
that's
and beyond that, if you're thinking that you have the potential in your hand to go out, coming up with those strategies, those approaches of getting your opponents to play those wild cards out when you feel like you have a potential to take control over, you've disarmed that bomb potential so that you know, okay, well now I can move forward with strength playing whatever wacky combinations
Without fear
I
of
have
people
in
coming
my
over
hand.
top of me.
Exactly.
Right.
You have to defuse the bombs before you can really play your hand sometimes.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
So you raised one other point that I'll mention, Chris, and that was around not giving away a lot of points to your opponents when they go out. And I thought that was a really clever part of this game compared to Teach You. I feel like in Teach You, when you get a crappy hand, you're kind of like, all right, well, I just got to play this out
Right.
Yeah.
and try to do the best I can to maybe grab point cards or help my partner be able to go out first, right? In this game, when you have a bad hand, you still have a responsibility.
Yep.
Because every card that you're holding, when the person who inevitably is going to go out first, that's not going to be you, is going to score them points.
Yeah.
So you start to think differently of, well, maybe I do use my bomb now to grab the lead just so that I can throw a bunch of cards out. I know I'm not going to be able to go out with
Lay
it.
this
but
5
maybe
cards
I-
straight down.
Right.
Yeah,
maybe
that's
I
25
throw-
points, right?
Right. And so you're playing defense, basically, in a hand where you don't have good cards. And so it keeps you on your toes, even in those situations. And I thought that was pretty clever, too.
For sure.
Cool. Was there anything about this game that you guys didn't like?
Yeah, I will say one thing that bugged me a little bit. And again, I think this is just harkening back to my love of Teach You. I just love the game so much, and I think there are a lot of great things about that card game. And I did mention this earlier briefly as somewhat of a con in that, Teach You has those 4 special cards. And if you find yourself with a hand of those special cards, it can make your hand very easy and mindless. However, that's not super common, right? But it is just fun to play with those, right? Using the Phoenix, using the Dragon, using the Dog even in a clever and fun way. I did find myself missing those a little bit.
But this is like having 3 Phoenixes and a bomb on every hand.
Kind of. I mean, there are certainly similarities, for sure, but I did feel myself missing. I know I have the Dragon, and I'm the only person that has the Dragon, and how can I use that strategically on this hand to either go out first or help my partner, right?
Like help you form a plan.
Right, because I know I have it, right? And then speaking of partnership, that was the other thing. I do enjoy the partnership aspect of Teach You.
Sure, yeah.
In those moments when your partner calls Teach You or Grand even, your strategy completely changes to, okay, how am I going to help them?
Yeah.
And maybe I'll lead this combination and hope that hits them so they can go out first.
It's like 2 tiers of thinking, like my hand and my partner
partner's
game.
hand.
Yeah.
So that's nothing that this game did wrong.
Sure.
Right? That's not a fault of Haggis. Haggis is a completely different game of its own. But again, I can't not compare the two. And I did find that for a ladder climbing game, I missed that a little bit. But again, this is just a minor quibble.
Sure.
That's really all I could come up with, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a ton either, other than that it's not Teach You, right?
Yeah.
And that's a pretty lame reason for it's not a con.
It's pretty much
right?
what I just said.
Yeah, it is, right? It's not a con because it's a different game. So I honestly don't think I have many. This game does feel a little more chaotic than Teach You, but I don't know that I see that as a bug. I almost see that as a feature.
Yeah.
I think they both have their place.
Yeah, I don't really have any meaningful cons. Saying the game is not Teach You and my brain has to get into a different space in order to feel like I'm competent at playing it isn't a con. It's just play Haggis. Don't play Teach You.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, shall we move into our final thoughts?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I'll start us off this time. I've said it a couple times in this review, and I'll reiterate. It's unfair to compare this game to Teach You, but I have to.
Yeah.
Because I've just played Teach You for so long, and they are so similar in a lot of ways. How does it compare to one of my favorite games of all time? I think this game does a lot of things better than Teach You. I do like the fact that everybody starts the hand with a bomb, and everybody feels like you're on an even playing field. Teach You can occasionally get frustrating. We always have a joke in our group that like, oh, you just won because you got the best cards. People say that all the time. I do believe that Teach You is more a game of strategy than luck, but there is some swinginess in the way the cards can come out. That's not as much of a feature in Haggis, I don't feel like.
I agree.
I think that's one of its strengths. However, I still do miss the special cards in the partnership play that I mentioned, which just barely pulls it down under Teach You for me. So all that to say, for me, Teach You is a 6 game. It always has been. Haggis is a 5. I think it's excellent. I think if we were in the mood for playing a game like Teach You and we had 3, this is just a no-brainer. That's what this game exists for. If you have a group that likes Teach You and you only have 3 players, or 2 even, play Haggis, right? It's a great alternative to Teach You, in my opinion. It's an excellent game, giving it a 5.
Cool.
Nice. Yeah, I think my thoughts align pretty well with yours, Chris, except for our final rating. So I actually landed on a 6 for this one.
Oh, nice.
I think that this can coexist with Tichu, right? Tichu is a 6 in my book for sure. But I think this game has a place, and I don't see it having cons that would pull it to a lower rating other than it not being Tichu, right? Yeah. And I think there's room for both of those games to be excellent.
Sure.
At the player counts that they're designed for. And so I landed on a 6 for this one.
Nice.
I couldn't think of many things that I didn't like about it. And most of the things that I had to adjust to as we were playing it, I came to love about it. And so I really enjoyed this one. Would gladly play it on a night when we're wanting to play Tichu and we only got 3.
Yeah.
I don't know how often that will happen, unfortunately. And honestly, reading on BGG, it seems pretty unanimous almost that playing this at 2 is better than playing it at 3.
Yeah. Good 2-player game as well.
So it'd be interesting to try it out at 2 and see how it plays there as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that. The reason I picked this one wasn't because I felt like this one was maybe necessarily best at 3. I think it's great at 3, but it's a 3-player alternative to Tichu. Was kind of the logic, because I know how much we love it.
Sure.
And I was like, Jason and Cameron have never played Haggis. I had.
Okay.
I was like, they need to play this game. I had a feeling that y'all would like it, and obviously, Jason, you loved it. So I'm glad that I did.
That makes me feel even better that I won once.
Good
All right.
stuff.
Yeah, you've played it before.
All right, Cameron.
All right. I loved playing Haggis. For me, playing and learning to play all the trick-taking games we've explored on this podcast has been honestly like one of my favorite aspects of being a contributor to the Hidden Gems podcast.
Yeah, we've played some great card games.
I fell in love with Tichu years ago and love that there's a similar game out there that doesn't require me to find another team in order to play it. It's tricky to wrap your brain around when you come from a ladder climbing game like Tichu, but it's extremely well designed, and I think I'm eager to explore more. So for me, Haggis is also getting a 6.
Oh, boy.
I think it deserves it.
5, 6, 6.
We
I love
compare
it.
a lot of trick takers to Tichu, and few so far have stood up to it.
Yeah.
I think Haggis offers something new and deserves a spot alongside it, specifically because it doesn't require 4 people in teams. Yeah. I would put these right next to one another on the shelf. It's awesome. I highly recommend it to folks in our audience who like this type of game. And yeah, my wife and I like to play card games. We like to play games at the 2-player count, and I'm going to try to pick it up so that she and I can try it out at 2 players.
Cool.
She would love it. I remember when you and Casey were first dating, you came over to our house and played Tichu with me and Ty, and Casey was like, oh, I've never played Tichu before, and I don't know, I'm not very good at this game. She was like kicking our rear ends. I was like, what the heck is going on?
We beat y'all, yeah.
I did. Unlike a grand, Casey, I think, or a Tichu call.
She's so good at games, and card games specifically.
Yeah, she would like this, I think.
Sweet. Well, Chris, where can folks out there find Tichu?
Where can Cameron find a copy?
Cameron knows this because he's been looking for one. He asked me earlier a question about it because he's having a hard time, and there's a reason for that. So,
did I give it away that I was going to give it a 6?
Well, not a 6, but I knew. I was like, okay, I know it's at least a 4.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, there are only 3 copies on BGG, and I think they're a little bit on the pricey side, right?
Well, I saw one online for like $126. It was like,
oh my gosh, yeah, no,
I'm not gonna do that
for 50 cards. Yeah, no.
Yeah. So this game has had 3 printings, I think. So the likelihood of it coming back into print, I think, is not that low. People know about this game who are into card games. I think it's possible. I saw some discussion online that people were like, you can make your own deck, and that's true.
You got to come up with the 5th suit, though.
It would have to be similarly backed, right? It would be hard to do. Not to mention, the Haggis cards have the point values printed on the card, which just makes scoring easy. Yeah, it's not ideal. Unfortunately, this one's just kind of on the rare side. Hopefully, it'll come back into print soon. If it does, I just recommend y'all going out and getting it. This game is great.
Yeah.
Hopefully, y'all can find a copy. You too, Cameron. All right. Those are our thoughts on Haggis. Bombs.
Well done. The Han Dynasty, founded in 206 BC, ruled the Central Plains and much of modern-day China for nearly 400 years. However, by late 2nd century, court politics and poor governance has left it in rapid decline. The government was dominated by corrupt eunuchs and officials who levied heavy taxes on the peasants, resulting in public discontent. This culminated in the Yellow Turban Rebellion, led by Zhang Zhao in 184 AD during the reign of Emperor Ling. Although the Yellow Turban Rebellion was eventually put down, many surviving followers went on to become bandits and continued to create problems for the government. The Han army was unable to control the bandits, and Emperor Ling granted direct administrative power over provinces and command of regional military to local lords. Many feudal lords took the opportunity to sever ties with the Han government and ruled independently. The more ambitious lords annexed neighboring territories to expand their power bases. This led to the emergence of the three power blocks of Wei, Wu, and Shu, and ushered in the Three Kingdoms period.
All right. Thanks for the history lesson, Cameron.
You're welcome.
Three Kingdoms Redux, published in 2014 by Starting Player, later reprinted by Capstone Games. We've been on fire lately. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 1,045. We're all like in the 1,000s on these.
I know what's happening.
I know.
We're not like giving up the mining efforts here, are we?
We need to get into the 8,000s next episode. I'll see what I can do. This is too close to the top 1,000. Designers of this game, Christina Jinwei, Yao Kang Long, also known as Youster on Board Game Geek. I heard about this game not on the Dice Tower because this is not the kind of games they play on the Dice Tower. I don't even think Tom Vassell has played this game.
Wow.
They've never talked about it as far as I know of. I heard about this game on the Heavy Cardboard Gaming podcast, which makes total sense.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I think on BGG this game has a weight of 4.04 out of 5.
It says 135 to 165 minutes on the box.
Yes, that sounds about right. So, as you all know...
Oh, man, that makes so much sense.
So, as you all know, we're not huge into needlessly complex and overly complicated games anymore. We used to be. Does that mean this game doesn't have a place? I don't know. We'll see. We'll talk about that.
Is it needlessly complex?
That's the question. Is it unnecessarily complex? Why is it a 4.04? Is it a 4.04 because it's got overly complicated rules and a bunch of mechanisms and phases, or is it hard decisions?
Good question.
Yeah, I think we all know what we're thinking there. But anyway, we're jumping ahead. We'll get to it. All right, brief rule summary on Three Kingdoms Redux. I want to point out, much like Struggle of Empires,
this is going to be thorough, is what it is.
Unlike Seikatsu, where you could play the game right after I explained it, you will not be able to play this game after I explain it. I'm very much sticking to the high points here, just trying to hit the most important stuff so you can get an idea of how this game is played.
Oh.
While I don't feel like this game is unnecessarily complex, there are a good number of rules, so I'm not going to cover them all. Okay? With that being said, Three Kingdoms Redux is a highly strategic, asymmetric worker placement game, where each of the players assumes the role of one of the warring states of the Han Dynasty, Wei, Wu, or Shu. Over the course of the game, the players will go through repeating rounds of a conflict phase, this is the worker placement phase, followed by a resolution phase, where the won actions are executed. Before I talk about the worker placement spaces on the board, I should talk about the anatomy of a worker, or in this particular game, it's referred to as a general. Each player has a pool of 23 unique generals. At the start of the game, each player will randomly draw 6 cards from a general deck, indicating which generals they could potentially use to start the game. I say potentially because you will only keep some of those drawn generals, and the number you keep will vary by state. So, for example, Wei will keep 4 generals at the start of the game, while Shu will only keep 2. Each general or worker has 4 pieces of information associated with them. They have an administration score, which can be anywhere from 1 to 5, a combat score, which can be from 1 to 5, a leadership score from 1 to 2, and then a general-specific ability. An example of this would be when the general takes X action, he gets to take an extra crossbow. That would be a real simple example, but there are many different interesting abilities on these cards.
Is that my boy Yao Yao?
It might be.
I feel like I had that dude.
I think we used him in the last game. Yeah. Your boy. The administration and combat scores I mentioned above are important for bidding for certain action locations on the board. In the center of the board are 12 common action spaces where the players will be placing their workers, with 6 of them assessing administration and the other 6 assessing combat. It's important to note that if a player places a worker onto a common action location, they are not guaranteed to be able to perform that action during the resolution phase. This is the most important part of this game.
Yep.
Just because you placed there doesn't mean you get to do that.
Chris is still a little salty apparently.
So it's salty, but I love it. I love the salt. A different player can place a worker in that location at a later time, and if that placed worker's combat or administration score, depending on what the space is assessing, is higher, they will get to do the action instead. This dynamic can create a really fierce competition over a spot as players can continue to place more workers into an area to reinforce themselves, with hurt feelings ensuing. Winning a common action space will let you do a variety of things. Recruit untrained armies, train up your untrained armies, acquire gold and rice, which are basically the currency in the game, acquire weapons, take the Han Emperor token, and play state enhancement cards. In addition to the common action spaces, there are also battlefields where players can place their workers. There are 3 different battlefields on the board, one in between each player, which I think is interesting. So in between Cameron and myself, there's a battlefield. In between Jason and myself, there's a battlefield. And if Cameron and I are in a battle, Jason cannot participate in that. And then in between Cameron and Jason, there's a battlefield where they can place workers, and I can't be involved in that. Okay? So it's triangular in a way. If a player wins a bid for a battlefield, they can station one of their generals into one of 5 limited spots on that battlefield. When a general gets stationed, they can no longer be used for worker placement for the rest of the game. So why would you do that? Well, if you do station a general, they will then score the player a number of points equal to the number of armies stationed with that general at the end of each round for the rest of the game. Okay?
Assuming you can feed them.
Assuming you can feed them. Right. Support them. Once the game ends, the players will take their total accrued military score for those stationed generals, and they will add it to a variety of different scoring parameters. Some of these include having the majority of stationed generals in each of your 2 battlefields, upgrading your farms and marketplaces more than your opponents, moving the farthest on the Han Emperor track, etc. Most points wins the game. And that's very generally how you play.
30,000 feet.
For sure. I left out a lot, but that should give you a pretty good feeling for the most important parts of the game, for sure. There are some fine details in there. That's generally how you play Three Kingdoms Redux.
Generally.
Oh,
I get it.
It's too late for that. All right. So I hinted at this in the rules when I was going through them, but I think we have to start by discussing the confrontational nature of the worker placement here. I will start by saying this idea is not totally unique. So I think we've all played the worker placement game Carson City, which has this confrontational nature, and there are other worker placement games where you can fight over spots. But in Carson City, for example, there's a luck element to it. You're rolling a die to see who wins the right to do that spot. Whereas in this game, it's totally deterministic. I place a guy into an area, you can see how much he's worth, how much he's committing to that spot. You know what you have to put in to exceed that. You can see what I can put in after that to maybe re-exceed what you have placed. It's deterministic. Okay? So how did you feel about that as a mechanism?
I think it's really cool. Yeah, it's not entirely unique, but it's done in a pretty unique fashion in this game as far as competition over worker spots games go. Man, is there a lot to think about, though.
Oh my gosh. Planning on top of planning.
Because it's not just, all right, well, I need this spot, so I'm going to fight over that spot, right? It's like, well, okay, but I need to do these 4 other things this round, too, to be able to maintain my armies and get the things I need to plan for the next turn. And you're evaluating all those different stats. Each general has different stats, and it's like, well, I could put this one in there to bolster that spot so I can take it back from Chris because he just stole it from me, but I really need that guy because he's really strong in this other area that helps me in this other action.
Which I also need really bad this turn.
And I could use this general, but he has this ability that triggers off this other action over here. So maybe I need to save him and use him for the action over here where his ability is going to trigger. There's just so many things to think about on that, and I love it. Right? We started joking about how long each other's turns were taking, just thinking through placing one worker at a time,
it's like,
right?
You know it's your turn, right? Yeah,
I do. I've just been sitting here for 5 minutes. Yeah.
It's going to be another minute, sorry. But yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo those comments. It's almost, in a way, like kind of an auction, if you think about it.
You're bidding. Yeah.
Right? Everyone has fixed resources. How much of your stuff are you willing to put on the table, right?
Yep.
And the crazy thing is the asymmetrical nature of the game is you have different amounts of resources in terms of numbers of generals at different points in the game.
Yep.
Because eventually in subsequent rounds, you're going to pick up a couple of new ones, but I might get 2 new ones, but you're only going to get 1 new one.
Right.
And
so now we're closer to having the same number of generals.
Those dynamics shift throughout the game. It's a lot to think about.
It is. Yeah.
And it's painful when someone comes over top of you, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the asymmetrical nature, and I'll just clarify because I didn't mention it too much in the rules, but just so everybody's clear, if people are thinking, why do other states start with more workers than others? Isn't that like a huge advantage? Well, it is, in a way. But the game is so clever in that...
in a way, a woo, or a shoo.
In that the player that starts with fewer generals starts with more resources. They have more rice, they have more gold, they have more things at their disposal that the person with more workers doesn't have. And then as the game progresses, the number of workers begins to equilibrate. Then the disparities become more who stations, who goes and sees the Han Emperor. Maybe they'll be down more workers. But it's asymmetrically interesting in that way. So I would just add that to your point. Yeah, for me, I agree with everything that y'all said. This game is tense. Tension. This game, it has it in spades. It's so good at evoking that. I think for me, one of the things that gave me the most tension, and Jason, you hinted at this point a little bit, is that you feel the need to do a whole lot of things on your turn and around. You're like, I need this army so I can train him, and I need this weapon type so I can station this guy later. But if you spread yourself out too thin, and you have just one guy in every spot, you are ripe to get picked off and somebody to come over top of you, especially if they're later than you in the turn order. You're just inviting it. And it happens in this game. It will happen to you. It happened to me numerous times last time we played it. And every time it happened to me, it's upsetting. But every time it happened, I thought to myself, instead of taking this other action, should I just put a second guy in there and ensure that I can do this turn? Sure enough, I didn't do it, and somebody whacked me. And you know what? That's nobody's fault but my own. Right? But you could feel that tension of being greedy versus, oh, should I just be safe here and try to make sure I win this, right?
So I think we pretty much covered that idea of competing over those common spaces. What would you guys say you liked about the game?
Yeah, I think this game is a little bit of a logistics puzzle. In a sense, right? It's a chain of events that needs to happen, right? Because the primary scoring mechanism here is get your generals out on the battlefield. There are other ways to score points for sure. All the end game scoring stuff comes into play, having the majorities and all that.
Very important.
And playing the cards, which I always underestimate and I always lose because of it. But the primary thing that the game leads you to do with most of the actions is getting your generals out on the battlefield. And it's like a 12-step process, right? Yeah. Of, okay, I have to choose the general that I'm going to send out there. I have to figure out what his leadership value is, how many armies I'm going to send. Now I need to get those armies. Now I need to train those armies. Now I need to get the weapons that those armies need, and I need to know which weapons they need to go to the space that I'm trying to get them onto. And then I have to actually win the battle spot to get them out there. Then I have to up my economy enough to be able to feed them and equip them with supplies for the rest of the game to be able to score points off them.
I think you should have done the instructions. That was a pretty good summary of the entire game.
I know, that's right. See, I did a better job than Chris. But that logistical puzzle of trying to sequence those actions and plan that in advance to figure out how to get everything in place at the right time, I just love that type of thing. I'm not great at it, which is evidenced by the fact that I've never won this game. But I enjoy games like that where you're thinking 12 steps ahead, trying to figure out, okay, well, I need to do A to do B to do C to do D.
And then if you don't get that one action you needed because somebody came over top of you, you're derailed now. You're like, now I can't do it because I don't have crossbows, and I need crossbows. I'm going to have to wait next round.
I needed another horse. Yeah,
it's planning that can be messed with unless you're being careful and protecting yourself. But the more conservative you are, again, this is what's so brilliant about this game, the more conservative you are, and if you put 2 guys in an area to make sure you definitely win something, that's a guy you're not placing somebody else.
Right.
Where you need to collect something that you might need, right? Oh, man, you're just constantly trying to decide, should I be safe here or should I just risk it? It's good stuff there.
I think the other aspect of that logistical puzzle that you're talking about is the fact that your primary workers in this game are your generals, and every single one of those generals has an administrative value, a combat value, a leadership value, and a special ability.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about these abilities.
So you are constantly looking through your deck of cards of the dudes that you have to play, and you're going, how do I use your special ability? Do I even want to use your special ability? Does your special ability suck, or is it awesome?
Which one of these special abilities can I afford to give up, right? Because I'm going to lose this guy if I station.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. And some of them, I was playing with Shu, and the main guy that you start with, his ability is you can play the +1 token and then take it back instead of it being spent.
Yep.
Super valuable because
Yeah.
it makes him flexible. Because he's like a 4 and a 4 for administration and combat. And so you can be like, well, now he's a 5 in administration. Now he's a 5 in combat. So you got the guys that you know that you're going to want to keep around. And then you have the guy that's like, dude, I'm never going to use your special ability. You're going to the front line. And you really do, like, with all of those things that you explained, Jason, you feel kind of like an emperor or a general or whatever,
Yeah.
like making all the sort of administrative choices to equip all the people that you need in order
Yep.
to win the war that you're fighting. You
Yep.
have to actually provision them with literally everything that they
Yep.
need. The food, the money, the weapons.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
that's what's so cool about most worker placement games. You like look at the board and you're like, okay, I'm going to put a worker there. I'm going to put a worker there. In this game, you're like, I'm going to put you there.
Right.
I'm putting you there.
Exactly.
You're not just deciding you're going to put a worker there. You're trying to decide which worker.
It's
am
like
I gonna
100x of Santa's workshop.
It really
where you're
is.
like, you have the +1 coal thing. This is like 10 times
10
that.
times that. Exactly. Just fascinating. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about the generals because I think this is such an important part before we transition to cons. So 2 things I want to mention. So I did mention briefly that we draft more generals into the game as the game progresses. You'll get more workers. You have a pool of 23. You are not going to see all these in a single
Yep.
game. You're not going to use them all in a single game, not even close, which adds to replayability. When you select your general, generally speaking, the better the ability, the worse their scores are in
True.
combat and administration, which
True.
again is another decision point because it can be awesome to have a game-changing ability. But if he's got a score of 3 and you really need him to have a score of 5 and you place him out in a spot, he can get beat. So again, you're trying to decide, do I take this awesome ability, but he's kind of a sucky worker? Or do I take the meh ability and just take somebody who's got a 5 in administration so I can know that I can win spots, right?
Yep.
Or do you put him with the other dude
Right.
instead of being greedy?
Right. It's good stuff. And then again, I mentioned the abilities help you find your path to victory. I've mentioned this before in other games like Halloween or different games like that, Agricola, Kingdom Builder, assessing the board, assessing your hand. Okay, how am I going to try to win this game? You're never going to play the game the same way twice because the generals you draw will dictate how you should try to play, because if you don't, you're just going to lose. You need to optimize your generals, and I like how that kind of gives you direction in the game, and then it's up to you to execute that plan better than your opponents.
Yeah, I love the fact that there are so many generals in the game.
Yeah.
And not only are there 23, and you're going to see a fraction of those, like a small fraction
Yep.
in any game, but every faction is different.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I play Wei one game, I play Shu another game. It's an entirely different game.
Yep.
Yeah. I was going to say, along those lines, I appreciate the fact that this is an asymmetrical game. I worry that if the game was symmetrical, a dominant strategy could emerge, and you'd spend the game basically competing over the same spots at the same time, and it would come down to who got the best general cards, right? The fact that they introduced all of these minor differences here and there, and I think they're balanced. I've played the game several times. I played Shu most recently, and I've played the other ones. They're well balanced. You have to learn to compensate for whatever you're proficient in versus deficient in at different stages of the game. But I like the way that the game is balanced between these asymmetrical factions.
Yeah, kudos to the designers of this game. Balancing this game must have been a beast.
For
right?
sure.
When you have 3 different factions that are changing in strength throughout the
Yeah.
game,
Yeah.
and then you have all of these variable abilities throughout. Thoroughly impressed by the balancing
Very
of the
much
game.
so.
I'm
Because
usually afraid of games that have factions, because usually what that signals to me
There's
is
a better faction. Yeah.
well, or that there's a very specific way to play that faction. I've sat down at games before. You go to someone else's game night, they're like, we're going to play this game. They've clearly played it before. Someone's like, sweet, I got red. And you're like, what does that mean? I got green. What does green do?
Yeah.
You know? And they can just crush that strategy because they knew exactly what order to do which. I'm talking about Scythe.
Yeah.
Okay?
I was like, I almost said it. And then,
But yeah, that usually is like a yellow flag for me. Like, oh God, is this going to be awful because I'm just going to get crushed because I don't know
Yeah.
what I'm doing? This is just not a component of this game
Yep.
at all. There's nothing you can do about the fact that you've played Way before that gives you an advantage over
Totally
me
agree.
if we sit down and play Three Kingdoms.
You might have some general ideas, given that way starts when we're workers, about how you might handle some things, but I totally agree with you. Because you only draw a limited number, you can't anticipate who you're going to draw.
Right.
And who you don't draw, and then
you could have the entire deck memorized, and it still not be an advantage
because
to you.
how those generals may synergize with each other.
Right.
The possibilities are endless.
Yep.
So, yeah, I totally agree with you. You can't come into it just knowing how you're going to do it.
Right.
Which is a infinite pro for me.
Yep. All right. Move on to cons.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, this game's hard. I'm just going to say it.
Now, but I want to touch on this. I think we alluded to it earlier. Why do you think it's hard? What's hard about it?
Yeah. So I've played this game several times now, and I think the thing that I still can't wrap my brain around is when it's the right time to strike on the border location and start scoring points and paying upkeep.
Right.
I'm used to worker placement games. I'm used to being like, cool, I took that action, boom, points.
Yeah.
And I think what I sort of felt trapped into is that I was so scared of getting the minus points by not being able to pay my upkeep because maybe I didn't win one of those actions or something like that. That I basically...
A legitimate concern.
I took the safe route, which was I'm not going to try to score on a border location until I had a farm and a market to pay for it, which I think is a losing strategy. You can't be safetyist when you play this game. You have to push as much as you feel like you can. And those are hard decisions,
right?
Especially when you're trying to advance your cause and gather those resources that you need to be prepared to place on the border locations. That's hard.
I agree.
That's hard.
So what I'm hearing is you don't think it's hard because the game is very procedural and it's hard to understand. What does this spot do again? What does this spot do again?
It's not hard because it's complex.
The decisions are hard.
I don't know how to beat you.
The decisions are hard.
Yes.
Yes. And I just want to stress that one more time because some people could see 4.04 in BGG and be like, whoa, I'm telling you, this game is not anywhere as hard to learn as On Mars or something of that ilk.
Yeah.
Those games just have so many phases and what does this space do again? And if I go here, what does this
Symbology,
do again? I mean, in this game, literally, you place in the space and you take a crossbow. I mean, it's not hard, right? I go here, I get the Han token, right? But the planning in this game is so hard.
Yeah.
It is so hard.
Down to the fact that, like, you know that you need to take that action space. So, great. I need weapons. So, I go to the weapons space. Cool, you won. Now, which of the 4 options do you want to take as your thing? Do you want the crossbows? Do you want the spears? Do you want a crossbow and a spear? Like, you could split it, like...
Or do you want an untrained army?
Right, yeah. Oh, God. Like, which one do I need? Do I need an untrained army? I don't know.
And if you pick the wrong one, you're probably going to lose.
You just become Jerry Seinfeld,
Exactly.
No pressure.
No, I agree. I think I wouldn't say that this is a simple game from a rules perspective by any means, right? So don't get that impression. But it's not near as complicated as the 4.0 rating makes.
Oh gosh, I can think of it.
It's for sure because of that planning aspect, right? Because it is that 12-step process of, well, I have to do this, to do this, to do this, to do this, which is, I guess you could say that's complexity. But it's not like the individual actions that you're taking are not hard. It's that complexity is introduced into that planning aspect of, well, okay, well, I have to think about which actions I need to take in what sequence and when and all that stuff. And that's what makes it complicated.
All right. We've been talking a bit here. I think we should wrap it up. Cameron, why don't you kick us off here with Three Kingdoms Redux review?
Guys, I don't even want to tell you how many words I've written down as my final thoughts, but I'll go for it. I have to start by saying that I have a ton of respect for the design of Three Kingdoms Redux. There is a lot going on and so many decisions to make. There are so many actions, and many of the actions break down to even more decisions in terms of what you decide to take. It can honestly be overwhelming to try to develop a strategy in order to make everything work with the general and the state enhancement cards you have in your hand. On top of that, you have to manage the quantity and readiness of your armies, which weapons they're armed with, as well as your gold, your food quantities. It's just a lot to manage. Not to mention the timing questions of when to strike on borderlands, start scoring points, and increasing your upkeep. I summarize it that way to say I understand and I respect this game. However, I am terrible at this game. I might be so terrible that it takes away my joy in playing it. This is an extremely well-designed game. I would absolutely play it again if the occasion arose, but I do sort of feel like I have to rate it with one of my classic split reviews on its merits, from concept to visual design to its particular take on the worker placement genre. This game is easily a 5, probably even a 6.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic. But because part of our review process is actually to factor in our personal feelings on the game after multiple plays, I have to say I struggle to really have fun playing it.
There can be a lot of hurt feelings in this game.
When I apply the fun factor of this game, it pulls it down to a 4.
Okay.
I know that's not an earth-shattering difference, 5 to 6 to a 4, but I have to point it out because mechanically, Three Kingdoms Redux is so freaking well done that I believe it probably deserves higher than that. It's like if I were to review a Ferrari or a super high-powered sports car, it's an amazing work of art and a feat of engineering, but there's no way I'll ever feel good driving it regularly.
That's a nice metaphor there, actually.
Those are my thoughts.
Okay.
Deep thoughts from
Deep
Cameron.
thoughts.
I like it.
Jason?
My thoughts are less deep, but I really enjoy this game. I agree with you, Cameron. I think it's a masterpiece of 3-player design. This game is fantastic. I also agree with you to a degree, maybe not to the same degree that you're saying, that it is exhausting to play this game. It is a mentally difficult game to play, and it's not one that I would always be in the mood to play. Mm-hmm. Right. That said, though, there are a lot of games that I'm not always going to be in the mood to play, depending on the circumstance. Right. I'm not always going to want to play fillers all night. I'm not always going to want to play a 5-hour game for a night. Right. I settled on a 6 for this game as well, and I struggled because I was like, man, can I give 2 6s in the same episode?
I've done it.
I don't know. But this game is fantastic.
It's amazing.
If you are not scared off by the level of planning that is involved in this game, you owe it to yourself to try it, because it is one of, if not the best 3-player games that I have played. Mm-hmm. It is not always going to be the game that I want to play coming over here.
It's an emotional investment.
Yeah, and feelings will be hurt, and I have never won this game. So I'm not good at it, but it's fantastic. So that's all I can say.
Nice. Okay. Folks,
it's going to be Chris's love letter.
This game is a masterclass in board game design. It's nearly perfect in every way. I mean, it is just so brilliantly designed. We talked for a while, and we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of more things we could talk about, but we just can't talk forever for time. It's just amazing. This game is so tense and so filled with strategy and planning. You constantly feel on edge in this game because nothing is guaranteed to you in this game unless you ensure it. But then you're hamstringing yourself, right? And you're constantly wrestling with yourself about, am I going to spread myself thin? Am I going to try to be careful? How am I going to plan this out? Every decision in this game matters. Everything. Which may make it not for some people. I agree with Jason. I think you have to be in the right headspace to play this game. I think you have to be in the mood.
Gotta have the right amount of time.
For certain people, I would probably play this game anytime, but I'm crazy like that.
The right amount of bourbon.
Amazing. If you don't mind meanness and confrontation in games, you owe it to yourself, if you like heavier games, to try this game at least once. It is a marvel. Clearly, I'm giving this game a 6. It is my number 2 favorite game of all time.
Wow.
Behind Strasbourg.
Look at that.
It is so good. Please play this game. If you like medium to heavyweight games, you have to try it at least once. I think it's fantastic. Easy 6 for me. And I knew that before we reviewed it. Nice. I knew it was good.
Nice.
I was just excited to talk about it.
Yeah.
And we didn't even talk about theme in this game.
No.
The theme ties in so well to the mechanics.
On point.
Yeah.
The art is good.
It's good.
The symbology is clear.
Yep.
It's a great game.
It's fantastic.
It's a great game. I wish that I liked playing more and didn't feel like a certain thing in my stomach start to happen if you suggest playing Three Kingdoms.
Cameron's like, can we just play hoity-toity
like
instead?
I kind of want to play, but also I'm scared.
Love that.
Well, easily we've found a hidden gem here.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Where can our audience find Three Kingdoms Redux if they're interested in giving it a shot?
Okay, so I just learned this, and I'm so glad that we reviewed this game. So please, everybody just hear me on this, okay? Because this is important. So this game recently got a second printing by Capstone Games. That printing has since gone. It's gone. There are no copies of that available, really. Okay, you can find a couple of copies on BGG, but they're very expensive. However, you can purchase the game directly, the first edition, from Christina and Youster at startingplayer.com. However, you need to move quickly because they are in the process of destroying their remaining stock.
What?
And the reason for that is because the game has been sitting for so long and it's not selling a lot right now. They don't have the money to maintain the space to store it, and they're starting to slowly destroy their stock.
That's insane.
This was just announced on BGG like a month ago. So please buy this game just to support them.
Just so that there are copies in rotation.
Yes, and if it sounds good to you, and if you wait too long, you may never be able to get this game, and that's a dang shame.
Dang, I might go buy a copy of it just to have a copy to give or sell to someone else who wants it.
This is just one of the best designed games ever. You may not like it because of its confrontational nature. It may not be for you, but I'm telling you, you can't fault it for its design.
Sure. It's
amazing, and if it sounds interesting, I would encourage you to go startingplayer.com and order it directly from them while you still can.
Wow.
Okay?
That might be one of the most amazing where do you get this game sections we've ever had for a game.
That's right. I'm pleading with the people.
That was epic.
Pleading.
So much tension there
Yeah,
for,
I know.
for a tense game.
Even tension in the where do you get it.
I feel so invested in this freaking game.
All right. And those are our thoughts on Three Kingdoms Redux. Well, thank you for joining us on this 3-player episode of Hidden Gems. If you like what we're doing here, please remember it's a huge help to us if you'd leave us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice and follow us on your various social media platforms. Check out the BGG Guild if you want to interact with us or share a game that you think is a hidden gem. And if you're so inclined, you can also support the show financially by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Hidden Gems Podcast, where you can get access to exclusive content, coupon codes, and more, or by picking up an HG logo tee on our website at hiddengemsboardgamepodcast.com/store. Until next time, I'm your host Cameron.
I'm Jason.
This is Chris.
Thanks for listening. This episode of Hidden Gems, number 26, was recorded in Raleigh, North Carolina on February 6, 2022. It's hard to believe that we've been on the air for 1 year. Join us again in 2 weeks when we relive some of our greatest podcast moments, revisit 2 previously reviewed games, and then review the Tom Lehman design Phoenicia. Hidden Gems is produced and edited by Chris Alley, Cameron Lockey, and Jason Yanchuleff. Our Board Game Geek Guild is monitored and managed by honorary Hidden Gems team member Ghidorah. Our show's logo was illustrated by designer and artist Caitlin Nieto. Check out her work on Instagram at It's Caitlin Nieto. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to join the discussion on our many social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook at Hidden Gems Board Game Podcast, Instagram at hiddengems.podcast, and Twitter at Hidden Gems Board. Disagree with one of our reviews? Have something you want to say about one of the games we reviewed today? You can also make your voice heard on our Board Game Geek Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, guild number 3874. Once again, thank you for joining us on Hidden Gems, and until next time, fellow gem seekers, enjoy your games and enjoy your search.
Why does it have the Redux at the end? What does that
I don't
even
know.
mean?
I don't even know what that means. What does Redux mean? Can you Google that?
Like doing it again.
Yeah.
I think.
So I always thought it was redo.
Oh,
Like-
that might be.
French or
Maybe it's like
something?
reduction. Like
Maybe?
it's like the whole history of the Three Kingdoms
I'm-
reduced to a board game.
I'm not even convinced that I'm
like,
pronouncing it right. This is just how they pronounce it on heavy cardboard. Redux. Yeah. Brought back or revived.
there you go.
Reliving Three Kingdoms.
Oh
Totally makes sense now.
man, I'm so glad we Googled that. Thanks,
That's right.
Google.
Thanks, Google.
All right.